Call to order this meeting of the Hamilton County Board of County Commissioners, October 15th, 2019. We have a couple of different things on the agenda. Both of them are related. So we've got a discussion and board action on administrators' recommendations relating to sales tax. We've got two options in front of us. And then the second item is the discussion and adoption of the 2020 budget. And so Jeff is going to give an overview of what sits in front of us. We do have a couple speakers cards related to these items, two to be exact, and we will call you then after the administrator and then go into the comments of the county commissioners. So, Jeff, please help us kick this off.
Thank you, Madam President. So over the past several weeks, as the board is aware, we've had several public hearings on the 2020 recommended budget, as well as on repurposing the sales tax currently in place at Union Terminal to provide support for the county general fund. Before the board today are several resolutions related to the 2020 budget. There's two resolutions in front of you relating to sales tax. A third relates to the 2020 budget in general. So again, there's two. You will, just in a moment here, have two resolutions related to sales tax in front of you, one for 0.2%, the second for a 1/4 of 1 cent option. Both of these were advertised and were the subject of 3 public hearings over the past month, and both of them would effectively extend the sales tax currently in place at Union Terminal, which will roll off in March of 2020. Of note, the 1/4 cent option was included as a component of my general fund recommended budget provided to the board on September 3rd. So for the public and those watching on TV, the 1/4 cent was included as a revenue component of my recommended budget in order to address two simple but pervasive issues associated with Hamilton County operations: stagnating revenues and rising costs. First, the continued decline in stagnation of various county revenue sources continues to stress our ability to operate. Simply put, the county is managing today on the same level of revenue as it was roughly 20 years ago. As confirmed by a recent outside financial review, we've been able to manage by putting in place a wide range of efficiencies and cost-cutting initiatives, including significant reductions of staff, consolidating departments, selling buildings and real estate, shuttering operations of a jail, employing long-term wage freezes, and driving efficiencies into the operations of our county buildings. But we've also managed by avoiding needed investments in people, infrastructure, and programs, and by employing short-term fixes such as funding operations from one-time resources. Second, despite the revenue stagnation, the county must continue to provide mandated and other core services as required by the Ohio Revised Code and demanded by our stakeholders. These include providing law enforcement patrol services that meet the needs of our residents, operating the Justice Center in a manner that promotes an individual's ability to reenter and succeed in the community, funding a 911 system that maintains a best-in-class operation while not bleeding the public safety budgets of our local jurisdictions, addressing the $200 million in deferred capital maintenance on our facilities, bringing our technology tools into the 21st century, and partnering with our local communities to facilitate revitalization efforts, particularly in our inner-ring suburbs. Repurposing the sales tax to the county general fund in April of 2020 would take the county's general fund sales tax from the general fund portion of our sales tax from 0.5 to 0.75, but leave the countywide sales tax fixed at the current rate of 7%, while keeping us in the lower third of sales tax rates in Ohio. To be clear, the repurposing of the sales tax would not go into effect until April of 2020 as the Union Terminal tax rolls off, so people will effectively see no increase in the sales tax rate. The revenue generated from the 1/4 cent will support a structurally balanced budget for the county throughout our 5-year planning cycle and beyond, although our projections show that we'll continue to run very tight budgets throughout those years. So to be clear, spending restraint and efficiencies, as has always been the priority of the Board of County Commissioners, will always remain a necessary component of the county's budgeting. And to that end, we'll continue to work with the CBC and the CRBC on many of the initiatives recommended in the Crow Financial Study, be it in the area of shared services or IT consolidation. But the budget as recommended, inclusive of the repurposed sales tax, will put us on sound footing to make smart decisions on an annual basis and take us out of the realm of being forced to make necessary but sometimes imprudent decisions, such as deferring capital maintenance or funding operations through unsustainable one-time resources. So with that, Commissioners, I know that Ms. Doherty has done a good job of printing out a budget fact sheet that is available for folks to take. You have resolutions in front of you. One is Resolution 34, which is the 0.2 of an option. One is Resolution 35, which is the 1/4 of percent option. Resolution number 35 is what I recommended in my budget. You also have in front of you, I believe, Resolution number 42, which is establishes the general fund budget for calendar year 2020. That's number 2 on your agenda. I just wanted to make sure you were aware that it was in front of you. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Unless there are any questions or comments, I'd like to move to the public speakers. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner? All right. So Recorder Norb Nadel is with us today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I'm here today, and I wrote you a letter, and I support the small sales tax increase. And the reason I do, number one, is everybody pays it as opposed to the usual practice of soaking property owners with excessive tax levies. Also, the other reason is that it reduces the property transfer tax, which again helps property owners. I'm here to protect property owners. It also protects at least temporarily, our marginally paid county employees, and I think at least at this point, it protects essential public services, especially law enforcement services. However, I really want to mention the elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room is the Paul Brown Stadium. Years ago, and it wasn't this commission, but a majority of county commissioners signed taxpayers' names to a blank check, and that stadium has been a complete drain on taxpayers ever since. It's a one-sided deal. It's a one-sided lease, and if that lease continues, which apparently it will for a while, you're always going to have budget problems. Unless that lease is somehow broken or it's modified, we just can't afford it. And a decision's going to have to be made one of these days. Do we provide efficient law enforcement services? Do we provide efficient county services that taxpayers expect? Or do we continue to have a stadium which operates for 8 games out of the year under an unfair lease? In my opinion, we can't have both. And also, my understanding is that none of the increased revenue by the sales tax increase will go to the stadium, the Bengals, or to any bank's project. So that's my position. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay.
No questions, but thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Our next speaker is Mark Quarry.
Thank you, Commissioner Driehaus. Director of Government Affairs for the Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors. First off, Judge, I think we need to hire you because what you talk about in terms of property owners is right up our alley. But as you all know, the Cincinnati Area Board of Realtors, we remain committed to defending and protecting and trying to prevent any kind of tax increases, and in fact lowering the property burden, or the tax burden, I should say, on property owners. Officially, I cannot say that we've taken a position yet because it's not in front of our Board of Directors. It's not in front of our commissioners. But the commissioners will be considering a motion next week at their meeting to support Issue 22, the charter amendment in the city of Cincinnati, which obviously would be the first step in terms of what's being looked at. But in terms of what's in front of you all for the sales tax, I wanted to, first of all, thank you for reaching out to us and seeking our input. I apologize again that I can't give an official endorsement, but historically, as you know, we've been supportive of sales tax increases to help alleviate the budget challenges that the county faces. That's what we've done historically, so I would imagine that that's possibly what our directors will choose to do for this particular one. I also wanted to thank your administration. Jeff Aludo, John Brugan, all the members in the budget department have always done a good job and have been very fair in working with us, and wanted to thank them for that and thank Jeff for his leadership. And coming back to you all and Jeff, we wanted to thank you for presenting this sales tax proposal that incorporates the reduction in the transfer tax. You gave that commitment last year that you would do so, and you're following through, and we greatly appreciate that, and we will make sure that all of the property owners that we talk to and all the realtors that we talk to will know that as well. So we really appreciate that, and we thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I have no other speakers cards related to this item, but I do have some correspondences. One is from Jim Neal, the sheriff, in support of the increase. And then I have a number of communications from outlying jurisdictions. We asked for some input, and I've got a stack of those, which I will enter for the record. So in front of us, we've got a couple of items related to...
Madam Chair, the stack that you have, are all of those in support of?
Most of them are in support. A couple are not, but I will be happy to share those with everyone.
Okay.
And I'm going to summarize those in my statement. So we've got a couple things in front of us related to the sales tax increase and to the budget. And I just want to say, from my perspective, this is a difficult decision that we have in front of us today. We have faced this once before, and here we are again with the same issue. This time, though, the quarter that is being contemplated in the administrator's budget is related to the Union Terminal tax rolling off in April of 2020 and timed so that the quarter rolling on for general purposes will happen right after that. And so while it is fair to say that these are two different issues and it's a repurposing of the quarter sales tax, what the action today, presuming we pass this, won't raise your taxes because these things are coordinated in a way that to make sure that that doesn't happen. So from my perspective, you know, we've been treading water here for a while. In Hamilton County, we've closed buildings, we've reduced staff, we've increased fees to our local partners. We have done furloughs. We're on a hiring freeze right now. So we've done a lot to try to live within the means of the budget that we've had in front of us. We've had some additional challenges in the most recent years related to state cuts, to the local partnership with counties and other local jurisdictions. The sales tax has continued to underperform, and we have had an increase in need related to the opioid epidemic. And I want to say that it's especially important to note that, you know, when people talk about county services, I think sometimes, and I'm faced with this myself as I move around the community, people really don't have a firm understanding of what the county does all the time. And so I like to think, you know, if you're in front of a judge in court, you've encountered the county. And if you have spent any time in jail, you've encountered the county. Or if you have a child in protective services, you've encountered the county. But if you have not done any of those things, then you may not have encountered the county, and so you may not have a firm understanding of the basic services that we provide. But if we don't do that well, you're going to know it. And that's what the county is. And so the opioid epidemic, when you think of the overcrowding in the jail and the increase in court services and the spike when it comes to children in this community being removed from their homes, there are especially increased pressures on the county budget as opposed to any other budget that's dealt with in the community. So with all of these things, we have a challenge here in front of us where we are trying to provide basic services, particularly related to safety, and a budget that doesn't reflect the need. And so we last year said, we internally have had this discussion. We had public hearings, but we decided between that budget and this budget, we were going to do an independent study. And so the CBC and the CRBC, the business community has partnered with us to say we will help you conduct a study on county finances and county operations. And so we've had phase 1 of that study in front of us. It's called the Crow Report. And what it says is that there is a need for increased revenue, that there is a need for increased efficiencies. It does recognize some of the efficiencies that have been done in the past, but recognizes that we need to continue those efforts. And then it does this comparative analysis between ourselves and other counties. And this is something that I think the three of us are acutely aware of when you look at other counties and what they have done in the recent past related particularly to state cuts in funding. They have increased their sales tax to address some of the basic services that these counties provide. And so I have my chart, which I hold up all the time, I know, but it's very dramatic when you realize how much lower Hamilton County is. And Judge, to your point, we're only at 0.5 right now for general services through the sales tax, compared to Butler County at 0.75, Franklin County at 1.25, Lucas County at 1.5, and we're at 0.5. 0.5 of it's going to stadiums, only 0.5 of it is going to basic services, so it's no wonder we're under this strain and we're having trouble, meeting the needs of the constituents in the county. So the Crow Report added a layer, I think, of information to help us make this decision. And so we've got a strain. We've got a challenge in front of us. So with that challenge, I like to think there's an opportunity. And so in the recommended budget, with the 0.25 related to the recommendation, that gives us the ability to shore up basic safety services. About 75% of our budget is safety related. It's the courts, it's the jail, it's the coroner. These are safety services that we provide to the constituents of the county. It also helps us to continue to do the work that we've already started, being smart on crime. And when we talk about all those different departments, the sheriff, we've got a build out right now for treatment beds, 90 treatment beds, because we can't afford a new jail. We're not suggesting we build a new jail, but we are retrofitting a floor of the jail to accommodate 90 beds. We've got an overcrowding problem, and we need to treat people appropriately in that setting. And so the 90 beds are for people that have issues with mental health or addiction. We need to staff that expansion. It's a smart thing to do. It's good for this community. And so this budget allows us to do that. We've also started something called CASC, where the judicial system has some authority to divert people out of the jail and into treatment, which I think is also a very smart approach. And then the coroner, through this budget, has the opportunity to have a more regional approach to the services that she provides, and we actually can make some money from other communities that can't do the kind of work she does, and we can charge for those services. Also, we can invest in efficiencies in this budget, and I think it's reflected in the budget, where the Crow Report in particular talked about, and this is something anecdotally we know, we need to be more efficient, particularly as it relates to our IT systems, which are very old, and they are not coordinated from department to department, and so we need to do an upfront investment to become more efficient and save money in the long term. So this budget contemplates that. It talks about more coordination with grants to bring money in from other resources, and it also talks about a more coordinated approach to economic development, both on the large scale and out in the communities. And then lastly, I think this budget allows us to retain these partnerships that are so important in the local communities. They relate to the property transfer fee. And we just heard Mark Quarry speak to this. We increased that fee in the last budget cycle because we had to. And so we have committed that if we pass this, we will retract that within a 2-year time period. And so that will no longer be a burden to folks that are selling their homes in Hamilton County. We also partner in economic development in a small way right now with the outlying jurisdictions. I think there's a real opportunity to be more robust in that space and help with some catalytic programs or initiatives that are happening out in the other jurisdictions. And then 911 is the one we hear the most about, and I think it's critically important to understand that we have two 911 systems in the county. One's run by the city, the other is run by the county. Very well coordinated system. It's second to none, and we need to keep it that way. And so the local jurisdictions have also been hurt by some of the local cuts, particularly from the state. They are also suffering and trying to meet the needs in the local communities. And so what we're doing in this budget is saying we will help, particularly when it comes to safety and 911. We will take that fee from $16 per run to $5 per run, which is a significant savings for the local partnerships that we have. So I think, and we've heard a lot about that in the public hearings. And so we've had 3 public hearings. We heard a lot about the 911. We heard a lot about some of the things that are contemplated in this budget related to economic development as well. We have gained the support of the police chiefs and the fire chiefs and local elected officials, countywide elected officials. And so I just want to share a couple of quotes that came in through this stack of emails from the local jurisdictions, because we solicited input and said, this is something that we're contemplating. What do you think? Give us your input. And so we got responses from folks from Cheviot and Delhi, Sharonville, Laughlin, St. Bernard, Addiston, Milford, Gulf Manor, and others. And some of the quotes go like, I think this is a great idea and a way to help the communities without putting additional tax burden on taxpayers. Another one said a neutral $0.25 is a very small investment, but the benefits will be widespread and lasting. And then another one said both of these measures through 911 and economic development are unparalleled in county community relations and partnerships. And so I wanted to share that, and I will share all of these with you. But these quotes are indicative of some of what we were hearing from our partners out throughout the county. So I just want to say, lastly, that, you know, as I said in the beginning, we've been treading water for a while here in Hamilton County. From my point of view, it's time to sink or swim, and I think today we're choosing to swim and move forward as a county. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues, Vice President Summer Dumas.
Thank you, Madam President. A very good summary of specifics of what we're doing for this budget. I would like to talk in general as a citizen 9 months ago and now a commissioner. And as a citizen, I was wondering that the county is spending all this money, you know, for different economic development projects, and they're talking about they need money. And so where is this money coming from? Do they really need money? So being a commissioner now for 9 months, I realized, having worked with budgets, federal budgets, state budgets, city budgets, village budgets, county budgets earlier, for 26 years I've been working with budgets. I realized 2 things. There's no excess money here. There is no money in a pot to do the general fund items that we need to do for our basic citizens to have what we need to give them as county commissioners, and also that they deserve as community residents. So there's no extra pot. When you hear about the Millennium and Banks Project and FCC, those are all coming out of a different pot, a restricted funds that are being used. So I just want the citizens to remember that we are doing the best that we can. We don't have any icing on the cake right now. I totally agree from my thorough review that the quarter-cent tax will allow us to elevate a little as it relates to the services that are provided. It will not solve the whole problem, but I'm asking our citizens to trust that the people that you have put up here are doing the best they can and would not agree, I can't speak for them, but would not agree to a sales tax if it was not necessary. And having been here for 9 months and having worked in the system and having really looked at this budget, there's no money there for general fund, that extra money. And in order to continue the quarter sales tax, it's not an increase. We really need to do this to continue to provide the basic services to our community residents. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Portun.
Madam President, thank you very much. I have been here the longest, of every member of this board. I was here at the very beginning in the early 70s when we still had sufficient money coming in to balance our budget and to be able to invest in certain things that were priorities. Nonetheless, we began to trim back, focus on public safety, and reinvest our funds in basic priority services in the manner in which they had not been done for too long. In my opinion, we began to turn the ship around. It's good that we did, because in 2007, the Great Recession hit. It hit us hard here in Hamilton County, and we went from a county that spent almost $280 million general fund budget to a county that spent less than $210 million in our general fund budget over the span of just a few years. A quarter of our workforce was laid off or positions unfilled through attrition. Those weren't positions that were fat. Those were layoffs that cut into the meat and the bones of the basic priority functions of county government as set forth in the Ohio Revised Code. We had people doubling up, tripling up on what they were asked to do with the same salaries, and then it wasn't the same salaries, it was less money. Not only did we impose hiring freezes, we imposed wage freezes. We went beyond that. We went through a stretch where we actually had every county employee from the county commissioners on down to have 2 weeks of an unpaid furlough in Hamilton County in order to save money and meet the budget. We appealed to our contract employees that were represented by bargaining units and asked them to forego raises that were called for in their contracts. They didn't have to do it, but every collective bargaining unit but one agreed to forego the raises that they were otherwise due in terms of what their contracts called for. We embarked aggressively in looking at shared services internally and externally. We had every department continue to look at areas where they prioritized and reprioritized again to make sure that while we met the extremely basic needs, that was it. And there were a lot of areas that were important and relevant to county government, a lot of areas that we were obligated to provide services where we simply could not do so, but for appealing to others in the private sector to take up the call. Particularly in the area of job and family services, we convened through the County Family and Children First Council a summit on how hard hit JFS was going to be and the functions that it would not be able to provide. And we appealed to the private sector entities and asked if they would be able to step up and do more and fill in some of the blanks in areas of critical services with respect to children, seniors, kids of all ages with developmental disabilities, seniors, et cetera, those that had no funding and were considered indigent and therefore unable to provide for the basic needs in terms of medical expenses and the like. And the county also was unable to invest in transportation needs and services to the degree that we should have over the years, further exacerbating a problem that exists in public transportation in ways that then was, I think, the precursor to what we have witnessed with SORTA recently, and SORTA falling behind in what they were able to do and ultimately leading to the consensus plan that was adopted just a few weeks ago. but adopted at a time when we were already behind the 8 ball because of these ongoing cuts and cuts and cuts. We heard all the time citizens ask, well, cut the fat, quit wasting money on some unnecessary government program. If there's one thing that I hope our citizens will do after today is before they comment yea or nay on what we do and what we are about to do, is that they look at these summaries that were generated through the independent Crow study in looking at county finances going back 2 decades, looking at all the things that we have done to cut and cut and cut and cut in order to be able to balance our budget, that have ultimately put us in the position where we are today, where we have an ongoing unsustainable budget just to meet basic needs. And our revenues were further impaired because of the fact that the state of Ohio at the same time was asking more and more of its local governments to meet the needs of the state, leading ultimately to a scenario where Hamilton County has become the biggest donor county in all of Ohio to the operations of state government. In my budget document that I submitted in connection with the 2020 budget, I have asked that we consider setting aside some money that would lead to local efforts and then teamed with a call from the Ohio Auditor of State to investigate and audit how it is that a county like ours that is in such desperate straits with respect to our general fund can be the biggest donor in all of the state of Ohio. When you look at the fact that we have 0.50 in terms of our total sales tax that goes to fund the general fund in Hamilton County, while Cuyahoga County has 1.25% of a sales tax funding their general fund, as does Franklin County, and as does our neighbor just to the northeast in Warren County, with 1.25% of a sales tax that is going to fund their general fund. Lucas County, which is Toledo, 1.5% of the sales tax going to fund their general fund. And here we are at 0.5%, a third of what Toledo and Lucas County get. More than 100%. In fact, it's 150% less than what Cuyahoga and Franklin and Warren County get to run their general government. And yet here we have struggled over decades at this little amount of sales tax funding that supports the general governmental operations in Hamilton County. And one of that is the fact that the voters, the people, the majority in Hamilton County, as is their right, but they adopted a half-a-cent sales tax for the purpose of investing in stadiums down at our riverfront area. And that amount of sales tax has worked over the years to support not only the funding of the 2 stadiums, one of which, Paul Brown Stadium, was grossly over budget, and those funds continue to fund a lease that, although we made a significant change to in November of 2018 for the benefit of taxpayers with the agreement of the Cincinnati Bengals. So I give them credit for that. A lot of credit, because they didn't have to do it, but they did it. They too have recognized the serious economic times that we find ourselves in and collaborated and cooperated with us in this redrafting modified lease agreement. But even with all of that, the basics of it continue to be a significant drain, and the monies generated from that cannot go to the operations of our general fund, are not dedicated to that purpose. And so as a consequence of that voted for sales tax, we find ourselves with so little overall sales tax money. Of the total 7% sales tax in Hamilton County, 5.75% of it goes to not us, but the state of Ohio. And 5% goes to the stadium fund, and only 0.5% of that 7% goes to the operations of county government. 75% of which, ladies and gentlemen, is public safety and our judicial system. Things that we cannot cut back on at all. We cannot do that. And we cannot further continue to tax transfers of real estate at elevated levels, because that is going to hurt us in numerous and in some cases immeasurable ways, as our county recorder, Norm Nadel, knows, and Recorder Nadel, that's why you were here today, and thank you for that. Mr. Query, that's why you were here. And your board, who have opposed increases in that transfer tax, nonetheless supported it last year, supported it in order for us to be able to meet our expenses last year. But on the proviso that we would find a replacement source of that funding for 2020 and beyond. One last thing on public safety with respect to all of this, and that is that our communications system, which everyone takes 911 for granted these days. You have an emergency, call 911. Well, we have seen over the past many years that is no longer the case. More and more jurisdictions, and I don't mean that there's anything bad that 911 services are doing, Director Knapp, or anything like that, but there's not enough money that the county has to subsidize or to pay for or fund the operations of 911 communications, which needs to be available to everyone equally across the board in all of the jurisdictions of Hamilton County. And it is not today, because we've had to bill local communities for the cost of that service. And they're coming to us and saying, we can no longer afford to pay what you're asking us to pay, because it's coming out of our budgets for police officers and for firefighters and for emergency medical response paramedics and other trained medical personnel and so on. And the amount that they're being asked to pay, many of the local jurisdictions, represents, in a number of cases, 50% or more of their general fund. So they're not able to do any of the other things they need to do locally. And all of this puts us to where we are today. So I close in the sense of sharing all of that with everyone by saying this crisis in funding that we have faced is real. It is present. It is current. It's not going away unless we find substitute areas for revenues that that could come in and take the place of what we've been asked to do. And we've done that, and we've asked, and we've pushed, and we've pulled, and we've tried and tried and tried. But our state legislature, for example, as just one item, at the same time that they have reduced the amount of local government fund that is provided to counties across the state, at the same time that reimbursements have not been at the levels that they should be under the law to come to counties, at the same time that they are cutting back in so many other ways in eliminating the ability for counties and other local jurisdictions to generate revenues under the auspices of the state taking credit for reducing taxes, when it is the local jurisdictions that are paying the price of all of that, and substituting higher taxes locally for the reduced taxes that your state representatives and senators are then running on in their reelection campaigns. You know, I reduced the size of, not me personally, but on the campaign trail, they're saying, I reduced the size of state government. I lowered state taxes. I did this. I did that. Vote for me. I'm your conservative friend. When in reality, they have created a situation where, while they have eliminated that funding and perhaps lowered those taxes, they haven't relieved any of us from the obligations that they're requiring us to do. So it is the locals then that are given the burden of having to still provide those services without any revenue support or the same amount of revenue support, and in many cases, much reduced revenues or reduced areas where we can raise revenues by the state. And so that's why you have police and fire levies that are put on the ballot by your local jurisdictions. That's why you have general government levies that are being put on the ballot by your local jurisdictions. And those are property tax levies, which means only a select number of people in our county pay those taxes. And I believe, and most everybody believes, that our property tax-paying citizens are overburdened. And we can't keep passing property tax levies in order to make ends meet. It's unfair. It doesn't raise enough money. And it is not the answer or the solution. And that's why what we're being asked to do here today, in order to meet our legal obligations as imposed by the Ohio General Assembly here in Hamilton County, are taking the action that we have to take, that we're required to take, that we cannot let the issue of whether it will be done in doubt at all, because to leave it in doubt ends up with the fact that we haven't really solved the problem at all. And it's a lot easier to defeat something than it is to pass it. And therefore, that's why we are in the position that we are in as commissioners, to have to take the action, to bite the bullet, because there is no room elsewhere where we can go to cut or to reduce or to eliminate without impairing our ability to meet the needs in this county, basic fundamental priority needs. Nothing flashy, nothing that we're not, that we don't have to do at all. Basic fundamental issues and needs in public health, public safety, and the like. We've got to take the action that we are about to take. And again, I implore our citizens to read the facts. Just read the facts. And there's no shortage of places you can go to read the facts and find out exactly where we sit compared to almost every other county in Ohio. In fact, we are one of three counties of the 88 in the state of Ohio that have their general fund supported sales tax rate at 0.5%. And if our general fund tax rate sits at 0.75%, we will still be only one of 5 counties in all of Ohio at that low of a rate. Only one of 5. And we are the only truly urban county in that list that faces the kinds of issues and problems that we face of those 5. The magnitude of the problems that we face and that your fellow citizens face in our community. So we have to act. We must act. This is different than a year ago. And I think that we as a board are certainly poised to act here in just a minute or two with respect to what we have no choice in the matter about. If we are to meet our obligations as required by law to the citizens of Hamilton County. And again, I thank all of those who are part of helping us to dig as deep as we have dug, to present the facts and nothing but the facts to the people of Hamilton County around this issue. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I just do want to reference a couple of things, backing up what you said. So the Crow report, which I think we've all referenced, is this outside external look at county operations, and it's made some recommendations relative to efficiencies and increased revenue. And Bridget, is this on the website? So this is on the website. It does do what you refer to as kind of a deeper dive, and so it's very informational. It gives a lot of data as to what's happened in the past, some comparative data. I want to just highlight two things that you said. One is that because of the situation in Hamilton County relative to the small amount of sales tax that's generated for general purposes, we have an over-reliance on property tax and on the state's partnerships. And so when the state partnership shrinks, we are in a very precarious position because we don't have the sales tax available to us for basic services. And so there is a chart in this report that shows that. It's really astounding when you look at it, but it talks about how all these other counties have a significantly higher sales tax going into their general fund budget, and we are just well below everybody else. And lastly, I was in the legislature when these cuts were coming down, and we were fighting like crazy because we were hearing from our local partners about the impacts of these reductions to local government funding and other things. And I heard at that time, and it was the previous administration that said something like, you know, we're intentionally shifting the tax burden from the state to the local jurisdictions. And you know, when you realize that it's intentional and that the expectation is that, yes, you will have to raise taxes at the local level, it really does shed some light. And so, as you said, there were fire levies and police levies run in our local. This has been going on for a couple of years. Hamilton County has not done that. Montgomery County did. Franklin County did. All the other counties did. Warren County did. They all increased the amount of sales tax going into the general fund. Hamilton County did not do that. And so here we sit today, well under where everybody else is, and we aren't getting the same kind of partnership dollars from the state. As you said, I really don't, it's like a false choice. We have no choice. If we want to continue to do mandated services and serve the community, we have to have the resources to do it. So with that, Jeff, do you have any? Yes.
Can I just add one more thing?
Yes.
And it's really important in looking at, and I'm piggybacking now on what Commission President Treehouse just said about the reliance on property tax locally compared to sales taxes. So it's not just property taxes at the county level, if you look at all that, but of course it's property taxes that have been raised and that, again, there was no choice here. They had to be raised at the municipal and township trustee and village level throughout our county going back a number of years. And I want to say that's been going on since the recession, a decade, that this has been going on. But a sales tax versus a property tax, if we had to, we have to generate the same amount of money that we are going to need moving forward. To generate that same amount of money from a property tax exponentially increases the burden on Hamilton County property tax payers alone. So 100% of the burden is on owners of real estate in Hamilton County, which are invariably almost all Hamilton County residents, and a select few number of Hamilton County residents, because not everybody's a homeowner or a property owner in Hamilton County. So it is a great burden imposed on a small number at higher levels. Sales taxes, and we benefit from this in Hamilton County because we're at the epicenter of a region. And so there's more sales tax type of transactions that take place in Hamilton County than in other counties because, in many other counties, because people come to Hamilton County from adjoining counties to do a lot of the business that they pay sales taxes on. And that amount is greater than 40% of our revenues that come from sales taxes are generated by people who do not live outside of Hamilton County. I'm sorry, who do not live in Hamilton County. They live outside of Hamilton County. So number one, we're raising the same amount of money overall, but less of it to the tune of 40% or more is being paid for by people who live in Hamilton County. Second, it's being paid by everybody, not just a select few. And some people will say that that's unfair. But when you have a scenario like this, we're in a financial crisis, I believe it's eminently fair that we have everybody contributing to this issue, especially when it is a tax that over 40% of it is being paid for by people who don't live in Hamilton County. So it is a much smaller overall burden per person in Hamilton County than would otherwise be the case in order to generate the same amount of money that we need. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Madam President, just wondering is the Crow report also on the website along
Yes.
with our budget? Both of them
Yes.
are on there? Okay.
Yeah, and Madam President, I think you said this, but the tax burden, the overall sales tax burden that Hamilton County residents pay today is not going up because of
That's
any
right.
action that we take today. It is not going up at all. Not at all.
Because we've timed this so that it will not raise your taxes. The one will roll off as the other rolls on. So that's the net effect for a taxpayer. Administrator, is there anything else?
No, nothing else.
Okay.
You do have resolutions in front of you.
Yes.
I do have a substitute to offer for number 35, just to correct a very small typo in the title. So I just would ask that this be considered in replacement for the one that you have in front of you.
Thank you. So I am going to bring forward resolution number 35 and offer for approval the resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Hamilton County increasing the rate of levy of the existing sales tax pursuant to the provisions of RC 5739.021 by 1/4 of 1% for a continuing period of time to be used for the purpose of providing additional general revenues.
Second.
Madam President?
Yes.
Further discussion
Yes.
surrounding the heading of this or the title of this, because what we just said and the title sound inconsistent with one another regarding the action. Because this relates to a sales tax element that would take effect on the day after the expiration of the museum center tax. It has to read that way. But as is indicated in the whereas statements of the resolution, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the seventh whereas clause lays out and affirms what we just talked about, which is, whereas the 0.25% sales tax for the restoration of Union Terminal will expire on March 31, 2020, and an adjustment to the Hamilton County sales tax effective April 1, 2020, in the same amount will result in the overall effective sales tax rate in Hamilton County remaining the same. Remaining the same. Thank you.
So did you have a change to language
Sure.
in this resolution?
Well, I haven't formulated a change. I don't know if we're able to, in the title of it, make that more clear than it is. And I hate to be doing, staff work on the floor here, but circumstances require us to address this in an exigent manner. And so, Administrator Aludo or counsel to the board, Michael Friedman, any suggestions here?
Madam President and members of the commission, so just as it relates to the resolution clause of this, so the portion of the resolution that has really force and effect, it reads, and so I think hopefully this gets to your concern, Commissioner. It says, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners does hereby increase the rate of the existing sales tax levy by 1/4 of 1% for a continuing period of time, representing an increase in the current tax levied under RC 5739.021 and 5741.021. The effective rate as a result of this resolution on April 1, 2020, the date of the increase shall be 3/4 of 1%. So it very clearly defines that the date of the effective date of the resolution is April 1, 2020, and that the effective rate is 3/4 of 1%, which is the current rate levied under 5739.021 and 5741.021.
I think that's even more confusing, honestly. I hate to say it, but I do. I just don't know why we can't say what it is. And people don't have the provisions of RC 5739.021 in front of them. But our effective tax rate, and also when you say levy in the resolves clause, I think, I don't know if we need to use the word levy or not, but I think that is somewhat confusing. Because we're not in, what is referred to in the words sales tax levy?
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
When in the operative now therefore be it resolved clause that you just read,
Correct?
when it says, does hereby increase the rate of the existing sales tax levy by 1/4 of 1%, what's the levy that you're referring to?
The levy, so as of March, as of the point in time when the Union Terminal tax rolls off on March 30, 2020,
Right?
the rate of taxation will return to the point, levied under that specific section of code will return to 0.5. So we are levying it back for the purpose of general revenues to the county of 0.25, making the effective rate, again, 0.75 on April 1, 2020.
Was the original 0.5 the result of a levy or by state action?
I believe the county levied that in 1970, but I don't have the resolution in front of me, Commissioner.
I think
In any event, we are levying the tax from 0.5 to 0.25 for general purposes of the county.
Jeez, just trying to get your attention.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say, and I haven't heard any objection from either the board or legal counsel, is that there's no problem with amending the language. We just don't have the right language here to make it clear as to what we're doing from my perspective.
Commissioner Borton, I would just add that I did speak with Dave Stevenson from our office, who worked to craft the language based on the law on this before the meeting. He indicated that he had worked with the administration on the language to be put in the resolved section, so no objection from my point. I can't give you an objection because I did not craft the language, nor am I the one responsible for that. My understanding from Dave Stevenson was that he was comfortable with the language that had been worked out between the administration to be put into the resolution. Your edits, I can't tell you whether or not they would have the effect of that. We'd have to get Mr. Stevenson on the phone.
Yeah, well, I'm glad Mr. Stevenson is comfortable with it. I'm not. Yeah. And I didn't mean that as a crack at Mr. Stevenson.
I understand that, but to say I haven't had an objection, I don't have that because I wasn't.
The content is clear.
Madam President, Vice President, are either of you willing to try to recraft this language so it's more clear? And if so, and my apologies to you both for this, but if you are, is this something that we could sort of come back to in terms of?
We have 3 executive sessions today.
I understand that,
So I'm saying we could do that in session and act on this afterwards,
Right.
if that's what you would decide to do.
Yeah. There's no doubt in terms of what the ultimate action by the board is going to be. I'm not suggesting any of this for the purpose of suggesting that we don't approve the measure. But I think it's critically important to us that this accurately reflect what it is that we are doing and not be confusing in any respect whatsoever. Because people who have not listened to these conversations are going to look at this resolution and dissect it, and that there are those who are going to, or could, I won't say they're going to, but could seize on certain language and suggest that the effective rate of an outcome of what we're doing is not what we are saying that it is. And they'll point to language in the resolution as their defense on that. So we absolutely have to be clear on this.
So what, as far as timing goes, then we have one speaker's card on an issue not related to the agenda. We could move to that. And yeah, I don't know how much time would be needed to try to clarify the language.
I don't think a lot of time would be required to clarify the language. Still would want to make sure, just to keep on appropriate regulatory timelines, that we would re-adjourn to a regular session after executive session and act. But I think we can clarify some language in executive session if that's what the board would like.
Okay, or we can just take a quick recess if it, and then move into executive session after that.
Open to whichever
All right, so
the
why
board
don't
would
we,
prefer.
so
Yeah,
why don't we
that's it.
start to work on some clarity? And I don't know if you need if they have additional conversation with the prosecutor's office. But in the meantime, I'd like to get to the speaker's card, and so that we can address that. And then let's decide, how much time is necessary, okay? All right, very good.
Thank you.
So we're going to put this aside for the moment. So we do have a motion in a second, but we are going to hold in that in abeyance for the moment. Move on to our speaker's card.
The first and the second, don't you have to take it off the table? I don't think you can just leave it open like that. That's what the
Jackie, do we need to do something other than set it aside for the moment? Do we need to rescind it at the moment and then bring it back forward?
That's how we do that.
All right.
Rescind your motion.
All right, I will rescind my motion for the time being, and we will deal with it later in the meeting.
Second.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to our speaker's card. Omar Childress is here. You have the pleasure of the floor for 2 minutes.
Good day.
Good afternoon.
Yes. I'm just trying to get some clarity where I can go with this situation that I'm in. I've discovered this because it happened to me years ago. In 1991, I lost some property the same way. And this just came by, and I became aware of it on a simple thing as a tree falling on my house from the developer that owned the property at that time that they had taken from a church. They had been, the building department have finding them people for about a church, a coach house in their yard that they wanted tore down. And in the event, they purchased the property for $31,000 and ended up selling it for $560,000. A large developer had sent my property next door to it, and I just see how it happens, and it should be eliminated. And the guy that worked in the treasury office was involved with it, as well as the people down there, from the process, the way they done it. And I can show it by paperwork, don't lie. They refused to take my payment, told my cousin that she shouldn't pay it all off to get on the plan, and my property was already in the process of being sold, and I stopped it at the proper time. So, I mean, I don't want to go through the whole thing, but, and when I came back and confronted him, because I went to Dieter's office and they sent me right back to him, and when I came back, he had resigned, so he knew he was wrong. He was wrong, and he was caught, and he should be prosecuted for what he was doing, as well as the people involved in the office, because they was tied up with it. And I don't want to go through the whole thing, but I got the paperwork to show you where I tried to pay it and they refused to take my money. And I went down to the auditor's office and they took it and said, come on, I can pay it for you. But I didn't have to pay the extra $500, you know, and I can show exactly how it went and what it went, but the man resigned. He showed his guilt.
Okay. I tell you what, my administrative aide Fatima is in the back. Will you raise your hand, Fatima? Why don't we follow up individually with you? You've given us some paperwork here.
Yes.
I'm going to give it back to you so you can give it to her, and we can follow up individually tomorrow.
I have a copy.
You've got more?
Well,
Okay, all
I
right,
got a
fantastic.
copy.
Thank you. Appreciate
right.
you coming in.
And then in relieving some of that burden, I do have another thing where I could come and see you all, because I don't know why y'all don't fight the city, because they keep hiding what they doing too. I mean, it's happening.
Thank you.
And the city is suffering from it.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right. We have a couple of items that I don't think we are ready to move forward on. So let's take a 5-minute recess. I want to get an update from the administrator as to where we are, and then we will reconvene in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay? reconvene our meeting. And we are going to take up items 1 and 2 after we come out of executive session. We're still working on the clarity of the language. And so I'm going to move that we go into executive session pursuant to RC Section 121.22G4 to conduct or review negotiations or bargaining sessions concerning employee compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. Another exec session pursuant to RC Section 121.22G4 to conduct or review negotiations or bargaining sessions concerning employee compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. And a third executive session pursuant to RC Section 121.22G4 to conduct or review negotiations or bargaining sessions concerning employee compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
Second.
Yes.
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 Thank you. And we do expect a vote once we come out of executive session. Thank you. We have moved back into regular session. All right, and we have a revised resolution in front of us, resolution number 35. This is relative to the conversation that we had before we went into executive session related to the .25 sales tax. And so I will read the title of the resolution so that we're clear on what we're voting on here. So this is a resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Hamilton County increasing the rate of levy of the existing sales tax pursuant to the provisions of RC 5739.021 by 1/4 of 1% for a continuing period of time to be used for the purpose of providing additional general revenues, which such action will not increase the total sales tax rate pursuant to this section above the rate that exists on the date of this resolution. I will move to approve.
Second.
Dreehouse?
Yes,
Commissioner Summer Dumas?
Yes.
Fortune?
Yes,
thank you.
thank you.
All right, yes, thank you.
Thank you
yeah,
all
for your
for-
diligence on that. The second item then on the agenda is a discussion and adoption of the 2020 budget. Jeff, I don't know if, we've talked about the budget, we've read through your recommendation relative to the budget, and we know there's a little bit of work to be done here because all three of the county commissioners offered motions or memos related to some of the priorities. So I know that you're addressing some of those in this resolution. So is there anything that you want to add?
Nothing really to add, other than just this establishes the general fund operating budget level at a high level. We have been working, we'll continue to work with board offices on various policy priorities, many of which are listed in here, which I'm confident, especially as we've continued to do things like allocate our medical spend across restricted and general funds. We have the ability to accommodate for, we're talking about a very small amount of resources. We have the ability to accommodate for the policy priorities the board has established in this resolution. So at this point, all the board needs to do is pass this, setting the general fund budget level for 2020. We will appropriate further, as we typically do later on this year.
Okay, so to be clear, this amount reflects the .25 increase.
It does reflect a budget with the .25 increase, correct?
Which is what we had in front of us to begin with.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, so this just reflects some of the priorities of the board, and they're listed in the middle of the resolution there. Are there any comments or questions relative to this resolution?
Madam President, I was just looking at the third paragraph, and I know these are only examples, but it says, whereas the board wishes to advance opportunities identified and recommended by outside financial review of the county conducted by Crow, including, and we bullet pointed three of these. And I'm just wondering, can we just add, including these three, that there are others that are to be included? I'm not sure how you designated those three.
So, well, I will say that these three, as we've talked with individual board offices, were the three that rose to the top from the various board offices. So of the different things, Crow recommended a lot of different things. And talking with the board offices to date, those were the three that it seems the board has an interest in pursuing moving forward. So that's why those were added specifically.
Well, I was just wondering, for instance, shared services is another area that we looked at. So just an addendum to, and in addition, other.
How about including but not limited to?
Yeah, that would be
If we
fine.
could make a motion to
Shared
amend this.
services is in the second bullet point.
Oh, it is, yeah, economic
Still
development and
in.
shared services through increased operational capacity, right?
Okay, I just brought that up, but I know there were
Right.
some areas that are not
Okay.
included in here. For
Madam
me.
President? Having said that, I think the including without limited to is still a good change.
Where are we adding that
So it would say
language?
Including comma, but not limited to, comma, colon.
I got it.
Yep.
So in the same paragraph?
Right.
All right, so,
Commissioner Fortune.
Thank you. And Madam President?
yes.
Yeah, and that, of course, reflects the fact that we still have policy work to do relative to this budget.
That's right.
And I presume that that will all be reflected in the ultimate budget document appropriating funds for 2020 that I expect will take up sometime probably in the month of November.
That's right. That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Okay. All right, very good. So I will move on resolution number 42, establishing a $276.45 million general fund budget for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2020.
Second,
Commissioner Dreehouse?
Yes,
Commissioner Summer Dumas?
yes.
Commissioner Fortune?
Yes.
thank you. Okay, that concludes our agenda. Is there anything else?
I have nothing, Madam President.
Nothing,
All
Madam
right,
President.
very good. I'll move that we adjourn.
Second,
Yes,
yes.
Yes.
thank you.